Writing is about the process. It's about listening and recognizing remnants of your story in the stories of others. When we share our stories with each other, we share the resonance of the human experience. The By Firelight podcast is your invitation to join our circle, a circle of writers, poets, seekers, and storytellers as we capture our living in words. This multifaceted living with joy, grief, love, growth, and loss is shared among us in your legacy, your story. The things you choose to do with your days as they unfold matter here. I'm your host, Betsy Delzer. I'm many things, but in this gathering, I'm a painter, poet, and writer, and I'm honored to be your guide through these episodes. Together, we'll find our muses in the rich and heart-expanding conversations with incredible guests, many who are like minds and all outrageously inspiring hearts. When you press play, you're here in the circle to share this space with us. By Firelight. In 2009, Dana Childs had a bit of an eat, pray, love moment, but with coconut rice instead of pasta. After climbing the corporate ladder, feeling like a misfit, and knowing there must be more to her life's purpose, she sold everything she owned, packed a backpack, and bought a one-way ticket to India. For over a year, she traveled the world studying numerous modalities like crystal healing, past life regression, mediumship, shamanic practices, energy medicine, and more. In 2018, she was vetted by Gwyneth Paltrow's company, Goop. She earned their highest rating as a teacher and was deemed one of their favorite healers. Currently, she offers remote individual healing sessions, group retreats. She teaches intuition and mediumship and offers plant medicine ceremonies in Colorado. She's also the wellness partner for 4 seasons in Oahu, Hawaii, where she serves as the healer in residence each July and December. Dana, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show and have you here for this episode. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Before we really spend some time introducing you and kind of even our connection, I think I would love to let our listeners hear a little bit about that, like how we found each other in this lifetime. I would love to ask, as a form of introducing you, what your younger, any age or older, any age self would maybe want to tell us to sort of bless the space.
So what I will say is, and this did save my life, you can at any point in time send healing backward or forward in your life. My early 30s were really rough and hard. And, there's like, oh my God, do I even want to live anymore? What's going on? Can I even make it? Is life worth living? Have I already messed it up so bad? And as I was traveling and doing a lot of healing, I would sit and I would send healing to that version of myself. And let's just get right to it, right? I had lined up pills to just be done because I just couldn't do it. And I remember sitting there with the bathtub full, the pills lined up, and just this wave washed over me of like, I can't do this. No. And I got up and walked out of the bathroom. And I never knew why it shifted or what changed. And so learning how to send healing and love to every age of yourself, to every version of yourself has been a game changer. That's what I would say.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm so glad the versions of you and the outside forces saved you in that moment, because you've been such a blessing just to so many. And so I'm so glad.
Thank you.
We found each other in rather unusual circumstances.
Yes, we did.
So, 7 years ago, we were in the Hamptons and we were both part of a social media influencer retreat.
Which is what? I mean, like now to even say it, like what?
What? I know. It's definitely like a moment of like, that's interesting that happened. And I kind of skate over that in my LinkedIn. But anyway, so we found each other because we were both on the service end. I was providing the yoga and you were delivering a workshop. And I just remember sitting in the workshop and seeing so clearly your light. Like I just really felt it. And I remember just writing so much down and also contributing a little bit in support of what you were doing at that retreat. And then you made this incredibly generous offer at the end of your workshop. I don't know if you remember, but you said, and we'll get into the work that you do, but you're like, I will give any of you some of my time this weekend. I'll make myself available for like a session or a chat. And I remember being like, am I allowed to do that? I know I'm the yogi. So then there was this rainy day, right? There was this rainy day in Montauk and everybody went shopping. It was cold and rainy and everybody went shopping and you were sitting in this like, I remember the hearth and the fireplace. And I totally just was like, can I talk to you? And you warmly welcomed me in.
Of
And from
course.
that point, I feel like we have stayed connected because I've been also coming to see you for healing through the years.
Yes. Well, and we've also stayed friends.
Yes, of course. So let's just unpack what you do a little bit in the way that you introduce it to people, because I'm sure people are going to be like, okay, so what was that session or chat like? Let's start actually with what you're currently doing. And then we'll go back into your travels and your departure from corporate, because that is a fascinating part of the story.
So currently I do reside in Colorado, and 90% of what I do is on the phone. So I do phone sessions, and I'll talk about what a session is in a minute, but I do phone sessions with people who are looking for help in every way with health or relationship or whatnot. And I also teach intuition, teach mediumship. There's online courses. I help people develop. And part of what my energy does, right? Because I always say, like, we don't need to know what we do. We need to know what we are. Like, what's happening when someone's sitting in front of us and we don't even know what's happening and what are we? And so part of what I do is blow open the intuition and scrape the foundation and burn down everything you thought you knew about yourself. Like, get it to a really solid level and then rebuild. So I do phone sessions. I am a partner with Four Seasons Oahu. I am their wellness partner. So I go there usually in July and in December and offer sessions to their guests in person. And I do psychedelic journeys. I hold those here in Colorado to help people blow past the trauma or the buildup or the stuckness that they have. So those are the main things I do, right? Sessions for healing, psychedelic journeys for changing your whole world and your life, and then the in-person stuff, retreats and teaching.
What gorgeous work. As you were talking about the sessions and the burning down, I think one of the greatest gifts, I mean, I'd like to say I have a pretty robust toolkit of taking care of myself, right? I think it's really necessary. And it seems like a lot of people sort of put a lot of emphasis on one area, such as, like their fitness or talk therapy or whatever. I'm like, let's bring it all to the table, right? But one of the things that you gifted me with that I will never be able to properly express my gratitude for is you helped me find and love my higher self.
Oh, I love that.
And this concept of like you would be in my energy, right? And you would be like, oh, she's so poetic. And I'm like, oh, I love that about her, and just helping me see myself in a different realm. I think we just think really dimensionally sometimes and it becomes really flat. And you really allowed me to see myself like, yes, there's this shell. And yes, it has an age. And yes, it has a life story. And you helped me kind of understand this intricate fabric and tapestry that is me. But ultimately, when I am in a place of shadows or overwhelm or just sadness, I remember some of the things that you helped me access and remember about myself.
Oh, I love that, Betsy.
And it keeps me connected to like the pinprick of light that I'm following out of that dark space.
I love that. That's what I do, is like connecting to the spirit, the essence of the person or the animal or whatever, and like really allowing that to shine through. So it's like seeing the full potential and seeing everything that's there, and the beauty that each individual spirit brings in. And they are so different. So I love that that provided you some deeper connection with you, right? Because that is you. That's so powerful.
Yeah, it feels like an eternal side. If you were to zoom out, like you just did, and sort of showed us these pillars or categories where you spend some of your time and energy, Is there a theme that you feel like people are coming to you for guidance for? Or is there something that people seem to ask a lot about?
There are a couple. One is health. A lot of sort of mysterious ailments and symptoms and things that doctors have trouble putting their hand on, or that they band-aid, with, oh, let's give you this for your thyroid and this for your cholesterol and this for your, and I'm like, well, it all goes together because the root cause is XYZ. And they're like, oh, go get a test for that. Right. So it's health is a big one, and relationship is always big. And when people come to me about relationship, we think small in terms of, is this the person? Is this not the person? Should I put my time here? Should I not? Right. And I love the way relationship work happens, because it's never about, is it the person? Is it not the person? It's about, what are you learning with that person? And when's the lesson done? That, right. And is that person growing with you or not? I'll have women who come and they're like, I don't know. I just don't like my husband anymore. I don't want to be married. And sometimes it's like, yeah, you're done. Like, let's talk about what you're afraid of and how you move forward in it. And sometimes they'll come and they'll say, I don't like my husband anymore or my partner anymore, and I don't want to be in it. And I'm like, yeah, it's not about them. It's about you. So let's talk about you and what you need to focus on. And it creates this opening. And another sort of layer that is a theme that people ask about is this deeper part of like, am I intuitive and can I trust it? Am I really getting the information, or am I making something up? I'm meditating and I'm seeing this or I'm hearing this, and is this real? So there's a sculpting of like helping someone not only blow their intuition open, but learn to really trust it as well.
Is that answer kind of all over the board when people are asking you that? Is it just very case specific?
About their intuition? Yeah, because sometimes people can be so fearful. And then what's really happening is they're in fear. And it's not about their intuition, it's about their fear, and so it's pulling that apart. And then sometimes it's about power, where it's like owning your power and learning that you're powerful and being okay with being powerful. And sometimes it's about you're overly intuitive and getting information that isn't about you or doesn't serve you, because you learned in your family of origin to use that as a safety mechanism. If everything's unpredictable, then let me just feel out into all the ethers and like read the room and feel everybody's stuff. Honestly, what makes a great intuitive a lot of times is rural dysfunction growing up. And so we learn how to read the room. We learn how to read everything. We learn how to kind of know what's coming. And then as an adult, when we do that, and once we've sort of developed our intuition, we tend to get an information that's not meant for us, or it doesn't serve us. And it just takes up space, or it creates fear.
Is there a level of intuition in every single human?
Everybody. It is a skill that is learned. I believe it. I've seen it again and again and again. It is a skill that can be learned. And I do think we also all have natural talent limits. It's like football. You and I could go play football right now. We wouldn't be that great. We're probably not that naturally. I'm speaking for myself, but not that naturally talented at it. I could learn. I could probably be pretty decent, but I'm not going to be like a Herschel Walker or Tom Brady. Right. So it's more of like, what's the natural talent level? And then how much time and effort are you willing to develop it? We can play the piano, but are we willing to study and practice? That's it. It's a skill. Everybody has it.
Wow. I assumed that was the answer, but to hear you say it so confidently, I'm like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Thinking back to, you haven't been doing this your whole life. So I do want to just like look in the rear view a little bit at a moment when you brought up fear and what might be holding people back. You were a successful person in the corporate world. Tell us about that pivot and the change for you.
Yeah, I made a couple pivots. I started out teaching English and psychology, and I taught 8th grade, and I loved them beyond, right? It was just amazing. And I did that for years. I actually got my degree and my master's in education and leadership. And then once I could see like, oh, this is how it should be theoretically, and this is how it's happening, I was like, these worlds aren't this. I want to be here in a place where no one wants things to change. It just wasn't, I wasn't going to do it. And so I was offered a job at the bank in mortgage, took that job and worked my way up through corporate. So from doing mortgages to doing marketing and just all things in between at a really interesting time, right? The banking industry was nuts. And I was doing a lot of yoga to compensate for the hardness of the banking industry, because it was like working with realtors and builders and doing sales across the Southeast. And, I'd walk into a meeting and literally the home builder company or the man in charge, because that's usually what it was, would say, "Oh, you're cute. I see why you got the job." And I would be like, "Well, I'm also really smart. So are we going to do this meeting or not?" And I would try to, in that Southern charm of turning things around and putting up with a bunch of bullshit, right? That we do, was like doing that. And so I needed yoga to like bring me back into my body and some power. And in that yoga, I was like, well, why don't I just get my teacher training certificate, see what it's about? And the woman who was teaching me had learned, her psychic abilities were open. And she basically just looked at me and she was like, "You should do this, this, and this." And as I started meditating, deceased people started coming up in my home, standing around, watching. And I was like, what is happening? It was really freaky. I didn't know. And I couldn't find anyone to help me. And I was really sad and my whole life fell apart. So we have to know we hit these areas in our life where things kind of fall away or fall apart. So I was out of my marriage because he loved to drink and it just wasn't something that I wanted to deal with. It wasn't a way I wanted to live. So my marriage had fallen apart. I had a really unhealthy relationship that wasn't good for me at the time. My grandfather had died. My dog had died. I was unhappy just in general. And I was like, well, I'm either going to leave my life one way or the other. Like it's happening one way or the other. And so that's when I just literally sold everything I owned, sold my house in the middle of the economic downturn when things weren't selling. My house sold in 6 days because it was time, right? So the universe will support us when we're ready to shift. I felt like when I was going into the corporate world, I would leave myself in the elevator and then I would show up and I'd be like, okay, this, yes, no, yes, no, it wasn't me. And I didn't feel strong and happy and connected. And so it took yoga and a trip to China actually to bring me back. I did this trip with my friend at the time, Garland, and we went to China and it was like, we had so much fun. And we were learning about silkworms and we were learning about culture and language. And it was so heart opening and beautiful. And when I came back to the bank, I just felt my soul kind of sag. And I was like, that's it. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm just done. And so I literally sold everything I owned, got rid of the rest of it, rehomed my dog at the time, and I packed a backpack and bought a one-way ticket to India. Traveled the world for about a year and a half. Yeah.
This is really interesting because this is the second time in a very short lifespan of this podcast where I've talked to somebody who got a one-way ticket, and it's like part of like this exploration and opening, right?
Right. Well, and here's the thing I want to address, like the fear piece, right? Because you had asked about fear. I remember when I was doing this and I was like getting my teeth cleaned and trying to do things before I left the country. And my dentist at the time said, aren't you scared? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And the pharmacist was like, why are you doing this? And I was like, I'm more afraid of staying stuck. I'm more afraid of what that looks like. And so it's like on the scales, right? Which fear is bigger, staying stuck or going into the unknown? And every time I've walked out of my life, because I've done it twice now, every time I've done it, everything else opens up. And then there are people who will say, well, you could do it because you were single, or you could do it because you didn't have kids. And I met this brilliant woman, and her husband, and her 2 children cashed out their savings right before the downturn. So while everyone else was losing their money, they were sailing the world on a sailboat, the 4 of them, and having all of these amazing, beautiful experiences because they knew as a family that's what they needed. And it was life altering. And so I think we have fear and we can make excuses, but really there aren't any. We can make anything happen when we're ready and willing to do it. What we fear is actually what we think we might be giving up. It's always about loss, right?
So I think what I am picking up on as you're speaking is that this The fear of the unknown, but also you said it so beautifully around that junction that you hit where you're looking at the scale. What is the bigger fear? It is universal to every decision we make, right? It applies to jobs, it applies to moving, it applies to love.
It applies to cooking dinner. Am I afraid to try this new recipe because it's not going to turn out well? Or am I afraid to try cooking because I'm not good at it, me? Or am I just afraid and I just would rather make something I know and something that's easy? Fear is in everything because we are wired for fear. It keeps us alive, right? So it's so helpful, but it can also keep us stuck. And I recently had a friend of mine, because one of my focuses the past couple of years has been relationship, like romantic relationship and real connection and partnership and building a life together. And I'm being open to that. There's a person that I'm dating, and she was like, well, he has to be able to change and grow. And the amount of growth this one person I'm thinking of in particular has done is gobsmacking, like unbelievable growth in the past year. And she's like, but any partner who's going to partner with you will have to be that because you will never stay the same. You will always going to change. And when I talk to exes, because I'm still friends with my exes, when I talk to them, they're like, wow, you always are in something different. You're living somewhere different, or you're doing something different, or you're moving in a different way. And it's like the fear of staying stagnant or the same is a huge fear. And so it runs me. And I think as humans, we have to identify what's the fear. And is it a fear that serves us and helps and pushes and motivates? Or is it a fear that holds us back? And if it holds us back, how do we work through that fear?
One of the things you said to me in the Hamptons was I was talking about fear because it was something that was holding me back at the time. And you said, what, like kind of a question like, why aren't you moving forward with this decision? And I said, fear. And you said, fear of what? And I said, fear of hurting. And you said, fear of hurting what? And so you just kept helping me get to the root, right? And I said, I'm afraid of hurting, and I remember listing the people. And I just remember you got really soft and quiet and you said, are you sure they're not already hurting? And when you said that, that was my like mind blown moment of like, oh my God, yeah, like I am creating my own limitations in my life and in my life story out of a fear that's already manifesting. It's already showing up.
Yeah. Fear is one of the most powerful energies to create with. It's one of the most powerful energies we have. And I'll hear it a lot from women or men who are afraid to leave a relationship. They're like, well, I'm afraid of hurting him or her. I'm afraid of hurting children. I'm afraid of the loss. I'm afraid I'll be alone forever. I don't want to be sad. I don't want to grieve. Every night when you go to bed and you lay beside this partner that you don't really fit with anymore, you're grieving. Every time when you feel lonely because your partner isn't understanding who you are, there's the grief, there's the loneliness. So what we fear creating is often already there.
One more piece of intuition that was such a comfort that I want to share is that I was so very concerned and worried about my then partner, who is now my ex-husband. I remember you saying, like, I just want you to know he's going to be healthier and happier on the other side. And he is absolutely, he's happily married.
Oh, I love that.
He found a partner who I could not have like chosen a better fit. And just to watch his health and happiness unfold, have had that a little inkling that might be the case, but then to see it come together. Like I went and celebrated on their wedding day, and like just for myself and for him and for our family's story, because it's such a beautiful confirmation of moving past the place of being stuck. Yeah.
I love that. Well, and you're just sort of illustrating this universal law. When we know something is right for us, we know in our heart it's right for us to stay or to leave or to change jobs or to leave partners, whatever it is. When we know like this is the right thing, it has to then be best for everyone else around us. It has to also serve the universe as a greater good. That is the only way it will work, right? And so you got really clear about what you wanted and needed, and to move that forward and push past all that fear. he's landed in this much more beautiful, solid place for himself. It's so powerful to witness that.
It is. It really, really is. I wonder about people who, this is like sort of a sibling of what we're talking about, sort of tangentially connected. And that is like people who find themselves rooting into a state of uncertainty. Like, I don't know, right? I was wondering if you could speak at all about people who are at sort of a standstill and they use almost like a cloak of uncertainty.
So I think there's sort of two ways of being in that standstill. Like when I look at things energetically, I see people in a standstill who are stuck in fear and they're stuck. Like it's not a good standstill. You know, it's like there's one particular ex I'm thinking about of mine, and I'm just like, oh, this is a person who will never get to that deep heart connection he wants because he's so afraid of unpacking what's in there, and zero judgment. It's okay. But it's like the recognition that then life looks small and stagnant and disconnected. And that's a stuck point. And we all know people who can be stuck, and we can be stuck at times like that. And then there's another kind of standstill. And this other kind of standstill, when I see it, is really, really powerful because it is about being still because we're so on our path, we can't see it. And we almost feel this sense of lost. We feel this sense of like, where am I going? What am I doing? We're aligned, right? We know we're sort of in the right place for ourselves, but we're sort of waiting on the will of heaven, which is a weird way to phrase it, but we're kind of allowing for everything to pull in that needs to find us, allowing for those doors to open instead of, well, nothing's happening, I'm going to go make something happen, right? That's a very different way of getting unstuck than to just embrace that sometimes it is important to be still, because there is a couple parts on everybody's path when we are in alignment where there is a stillness that almost is like pure magnetism. And as we're that still, we're drawing in, right? Because we're aligned. We're drawing in the people, the events, the situations, the opportunities, everything that's needed starts to come in. That all happens in stillness. We're a society that rushes to get things done and tries to make things happen instead of a society that gets aligned, feels connected, and draws it in. And those are two very different ways of moving.
One of the things I know about your healing and guidance is that it's not only through talking and the energies, but you also help us tune into the body. And so I'm wondering, when somebody might be in that place of stillness in alignment, I feel sometimes energetically like my heart is full to the brim. Like it feels like just in my chest, actually, but also like all the love I could possibly contain or all the hope I could possibly contain. It gets a real feeling of fullness. And in that space, sort of it expands. But that's one way that my body kind of tells me I'm in a moment of good and right and true for me. How else, either in the standstill magnetic place or standstill stuck place, or how might your body show that to you or show you the truth?
Well, what I teach all the time is our body doesn't lie. Our body can't lie. You know, you're allergic to dairy. You eat dairy. It's not going to lie to you. It's going to tell you real quick. It is very, very truthful. And so our body is always talking to us. It talks in terms of symptoms. It talks in terms of illnesses, right? We are holistic creatures. If we have an illness, there is an emotional underpinning. There is something else going on. We break a bone, we're breaking up with a belief. We're trying to, be shown how to break away from that. And remember that bones heal stronger. They're stronger once they reform. So the body is always communicating. I did it online. This was right when COVID was happening, 2020, with Goop online. So it's on YouTube. The listeners can Google it. And it was about how to trust the body. And so I went through an exercise in there about how to trust it. But what I like to do is to sit and get really quiet. And you ask that your body is your tool. Your body tells you everything. And so then you think of something, you pull to mind something that is stressful, that is really tense, be it a person, be it a situation, be it whatever. but you pull that to mind. And then you kind of scan your body top to bottom and you see the places of tension and tightness. Just pay attention. Maybe the throat's tight. Maybe the belly hurts. Maybe the feet tingle. And you just pay attention to the symptoms. You're not looking for feelings or thoughts. Just what are the sensations in your body? And then you want to think of something that you love, be it a place or a person or a moment. And you pull that to mind and you kind of sit in that energy. And then again, you scan your body head to toe and you feel the sensations. My guess for you is that you would feel this like heart sensations opening that you're talking about. You would feel that and you might feel other things. And so then you recognize that the way your body says no is that fearful tension. And the way your body says yes is that thing that you love. And so then you can kind of line up options like, what should I have for dinner? Or which person should I marry? Or, whatever you got going on. You can line up those options and pull that option to mind and scan your body and see if it's a yes or a no. Because the body will be really clear and tell you when you get quiet enough. It just doesn't lie. It never does.
I remember that event and I came to it live. I just recently went in preparation for this episode. I went to just look and see if it was still there. And it's upwards of like 30,000 views at this point. And
oh, I love that.
I know. I'm like, it was such a special and sacred moment in COVID because I couldn't wait to see you again, just friend to friend. But, I was lonely and scared in the pandemic. And yeah, your teaching, we'll definitely put the link in the show notes because you and Elise Lonin did a beautiful job in just kind of carrying that space and finding at the moment my body's yes and no. While I feel like I've attuned to it more and I'm getting a little better at it, it was so helpful in that moment in time of the pandemic to have that tool. So that teaching was so spot on. So thank you again for that.
Oh my gosh, of course. It's one of my favorite things to teach because it's so clear. It's like, it just becomes so clear. The moment you recognize like, oh, my body's telling me, and then you can get quiet and it's right there. Your body is constantly speaking.
This is a great segue to talking a little bit about Goop. You have been a writer, and since this is a podcast geared towards writing and writers, I'd love to talk a little bit about your experience writing for them and what that's been like for you.
I've read several articles for Goop on being an empath, an empath in relationships, what that looks like. And one of my favorite ones that I wrote for them was actually a Dear Intuitive. So they sent me, like, they had a letter that was written in. It was about dating and it's still up on their website. And it was just like feeling the person, right? Because I feel the person, as long as I have like a name, I can feel the energy immediately. I just need the name. And that response really hit with their readers. And it really made a difference because I think when we're dating, and Goop's so good about bringing sort of things out holistically that we don't really think about, but when we're dating, we want our friends' approval. And this is what the letter was about. And it was like, your friends don't matter. It's not about your friends. It's about why are you making the choices to date the people that you're dating? And so there was something really empowering about that article. That's probably been one of my favorites with them. But yeah, I've loved writing for them because they're also so open with, you can be yourself and like say what you need to say. And they don't really censor like that. They just let people be who they are, which I think is a great way to encourage people to write what they really believe in, right? Write what they know.
So as a former English teacher, did you do some teaching of writing?
Yeah, I did a lot of teaching of writing, and it was limited because largely I taught in the public school system. And so we had a very strict curriculum we had to follow. And they did not focus much on writing. And so I always had prompts. When the kids came in, I wanted them to see the board, the whiteboard, and to be able to look at it and start writing right away. So they had something to occupy them, something to get in their desk, something to think about, putting pen to paper. They had their supplies out. It was very, very technically thought through. And then they had these journals. And so then I would take their journals and, once a couple weeks or whatever and read through the things they had written. But I didn't really have the space, capacity, or allowance to teach like real deep writing. It was, how do you compose a sentence and put a period at the end? And where does the comma go? And is that really a sentence? Because you don't have a subject and a verb. It was like things like that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's a little bit more on the technical side.
little bit more on the technical side. Yeah.
What's been your relationship to writing? Were you a writer as a child?
Love, hate. It's a love, hate, which is there a writer who doesn't have a love, hate relationship with it? I mean, okay. So here's something that you just made me think of. When I was a kid, I remember I was in like the gifted program, right? You know how, right. Most of us probably were, and now we're just dysfunctional adults. So in this gifted program, she had me write a story, and I had so much fun writing the story. It was fourth grade. I will never forget it. It was about stuffed animals that came to life. You know, this was pre Toy Story. Like I was ahead of my time. So I wrote this story, and I remember hearing her talk to my mom. So little kids were so impacted by what adults say around us. And I remember her talking to my mom, and she's like, she's so creative. She's such a good writer. And I remember that encouragement, and that made me love it more. I was an avid reader. I remember my parents made fun of me because I would read the Wall Street Journal in like kindergarten. It was just insanity. And then I got into high school, and I still loved writing. And I had an English teacher named Miss Bertrand, and she was not a fan of mine. And everything I wrote, she would destroy it. She would tell me how awful it was, or, you know, like mark it up like crazy. And so I had this knowing of like, I know I'm a good writer, and I know she doesn't like me. And what do I do with that? And so I stopped writing, because that's how much influence that had on me. And it wasn't until later after college where I got back to writing for me, because of that influence that I allowed this teacher to have. And teachers have so much influence. And then getting back into writing was more of like a claiming myself. So while I was traveling, after I had left the corporate world and I was traveling around, I wrote my way through these countries. And so I kept a blog. I think it was called like Yoga Traveler at WordPress, probably still out there somewhere, right? But I wrote a blog, and I would just tell the stories of like what was happening, and my friends and family were reading it. And then that's how I stayed connected to the foundation of who I was, with this spiritually opening part of what was happening in my life. And so it was a very anchoring thing to write and to process through writing what was happening to me and how I was opening. That's probably back where I cemented. So right now, when I write, I get in those like, oh, I want to write every day, and I'm going to write everything, and it's going to be amazing. And I do that for like 8 months. And then I'm like, I'm not writing for a year, So like, I don't know that I've really written anything much since January this year. And we're sitting in like the fall or winter, but I write to process my life and to understand it. And so the stories that now I'm writing are about how do we spiritually awaken, and what happens in that process, and how do we fall in love, and what happens in that process, and how do we fall out of love, and how do we keep a hold of ourselves while falling in and out of love, and how do we keep a hold of our alignment. And so writing those kind of stories right now is where I'm like, how I'm utilizing writing, I guess I'll say.
Do you think that that's going to find a platform of some kind? It may not be WordPress.
I would love for it to. I don't yet know what that looks like, but now it's just like writing because my heart wants to write it, and assuming, just like I said, when we're still and we're aligned, the things and people and places we need come in. So it's like, just wait for that.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels very Substack worthy. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I'm very familiar with Substack. Yeah.
Or just like, as you were saying all those things, I'm like, I want to read it. I want to read it. I want to, so it's like, so where can I read it?
Yeah, I have a writing partner, because I do think writing with partners in groups is so powerful, right? I'm sure you and a lot of your listeners are very aware of this. And we get on Zoom and we write, and we do writing exercises. And we were so good about this for so many months. And then it turned into like, okay, let's just talk. Let's just have conversation. So we've got to get back to our writing because life kind of got busy. But in that, we hear each other's stories, because I think it's easy to stop writing when you don't have an audience and someone to hear it and reflect back to you like, oh, I wanted more of this, or like, I didn't understand this, or I loved that. And so when we have that reflection, it tends to kind of encourage. And so it's like, even just to have one person to share it with, and then they're like, oh, I really took this away from it. That made a difference. And then just to write something and it makes a difference in you, like you shift the way you see it. Powerful.
If you were to think of a prompt for someone who is listening and is like, okay, I'm curious about like opening my intuition or kind of listening more to the somatics of my experience of yes and no, or looking for that guidance or guidelines. There's so many things that we've talked about that I feel like people could want to process in writing. What would a prompt be that you could think of or that you would offer for somebody who might be in one of those spaces?
So here's what I do for myself. I will sit with something that I want more information about or I want clarity on. It may be a relationship. It may be a work thing. It may be a dog thing. And I sit with the idea of what I want to explore, right? So your prompt is really what you're wanting to explore. I set the timer for 5 minutes or maybe 10, depending on the mood I'm in. And I close my eyes before I start the timer and I just get really quiet. And I imagine the top of my head opening up to receive the divine guidance or wisdom or knowing. And I sit with that and I try to move my personal emotions or feelings or preferences out of the way. And I just sit with that. And then I start the timer and I put my pen down, and I do use pen to paper for this. And I do not pick the pen up. I do not punctuate. I do not care. The pen cannot leave the paper. And it is a constant stream of writing, even if it is, I hate writing, I hate writing, I hate writing, whatever it is, right? You cannot pick and just to get in that automatic flow, and you're just in a flurry for 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it may be. And then you stop the timer and then you breathe for a minute and then you go back and you kind of reread what you wrote down. And it's fascinating because sometimes you won't even remember what you wrote, and so much clarity can come in. And so it's kind of like you're getting all the crap out of the way. So I will even do this before I have a writing session. I'll do this. You're getting all the crap out of the way and you're getting clarity. And so it's more of that automatic writing where you're moving your thoughts. And so you can allow for whatever's meant to flow through you to flow through. That's one of my favorite prompts to do. Yeah.
That's so helpful. And I think will really inspire so many. We've had a lot of people kind of come to us after some of these episodes and say, like, I'm starting to write. I haven't, or I've had a block, or I'm scared to try, whatever, and hearing things like that, just really practical, tactical ways of beginning have been really, really helpful.
I love that.
Yeah. So we are at a time of closing, but before, I love to give a few we do it like quick write in my writing group where we just like throw out a prompt and you just say whatever comes to mind. Okay.
Okay.
So we'll close with that, but then I also want to make sure that people know where to find you. So, okay, let's see. I'm looking at my little list here. Okay. You ready?
Yep.
Okay. The path inward reveals
everything.
If I'm scared to uncover, discover, recover, I can
get help.
Hindsight 2020. True or false?
Not always true.
Body keeps the score, also tells the truth. What does the mind do?
Fucks your shit up. Can I say that? Sends you down a roller coaster of wrong.
To trust my heart, I can.
I need to be in it.
Dana, you are such a gift. You're such a gift. And
who are you?
This time has been so lovely. We will add a few links of things that we've mentioned, but where else can people find you?
My website is the best place, danachildsintuitive.com. And I'm pretty active on Instagram as well. So those are two places that I can always be found, or the Four Seasons Oahu in December and July. I can be found there.
Like all of us would like to find you there.
Right? Find me there. Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to put in the space or anything that has been unsaid?
I just think that, those who are really looking at the writing and writing blocks and not getting started or fear of getting started, you just kind of do it. And for all of us, it may be something different. Maybe it's a prompt that helps break that space open. Maybe it's a course. I mean, I remember there's a woman named Amy Malloy. She had this writing course and I just signed up and took it, and it opened the floodgates, right? Just It's finding that support system or that course or that thing or that prompt that just can get things going, and then stepping out of judgment. To not self-judge gives us so much freedom.
So much. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you.
By Firelight is a Lit Path Studios production and is produced by Jamie Gale and Betsy Delzer. Music is by Legito Music and Pond 5. Thank you for being a part of our beautiful collection of stories.